Hi guys, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the SU-85i, a brand new premium tank added to the game with the last patch 9.0, and it is only available from the gift shop. So the tank cannot be bought in-game from the tech tree. You do have to go to the gift shop and you can pick up the SU-85i for €10, 35, or something equivalent in dollars. It is a Tier 5 Russian premium tank destroyer, and it brings the number of premium tank destroyers on the Russian line up to 3. So it slots in before the SU-122-44 and the SU-100Y. The SU-85i has been in the game since the game was launched. This is a tank that was originally supposed to be available in special edition box sets at the time World of Tanks was released, but those box sets never made it to market, and up till the tank was put into the gift shop for 9.0, this tank never existed on any of the servers in any of the regions. So we've got a very brief history for this tank. Basically, this was a prototype, mainly on paper. They weren't put into production, and they weren't developed at all. Basically, it was developed as a tank destroyer to meet the threat of more heavily armored German tanks such as the Panther and the Tiger. And what this is it's actually a German tank. Yes, it's a captured German tank. If you are wondering why the front of the tank looks rather German, that's because it is. It's a Panzer III. So you have the Panzer III hull, and it has been mounted with a fixed turret and an 85mm gun, hence it gets the SU-85i designation. That's pretty much it for the history of the tank. It was never developed, it was never put into production, it never saw action. So the burning question today, is this tank worth €10? Well, it's rare. It's the first time it's ever been made available, and as it's only available from the gift shop, there's nothing to stop Wargaming from removing it again and then just bringing it out for special occasions. So if you pick it up now, you're going to have probably one of the rarest tanks in the game in your garage. But is it worth it? Long story short, no. There are so many things wrong with this tank, I honestly don't know where to start. Usually in my reviews, I like to compare the tanks versus their premium equivalents, but I can't really do that because there are no premium Tier 5 TDs in the game. So what I'm going to have to do is compare it against the other Tier 5 Russian TD, the SU-85, which is its cousin. I have, however, played every single Tier 5 TD in the game. In fact, I've even kept a few. I've got the French S-35CA, because I really like this tank, even though it's ugly as sin. I've kept the Wolverine, which is a very good Tier 5 American TD, and I've kept the T-49, which is probably my favorite Tier 5 TD. We'll take a look at the hit points, and we'll see that there's a positive for the tank. We've got 380 hit points compared to 350 on the SU-85, 330 on the S-35CA, and 360 on both the Wolverine and the T-49. So that is a positive. It gets more hit points, but don't let that excite you. This tank is a Tier 5 TD. You will be facing lots of 122mm guns, and I have been one-hit killed by KV-1Ss. I have been one-hit killed by SU-85s firing the derp gun. I have been one-hit killed by PZ-4s firing the derp gun. I have been one-hit killed by SU-100Ys. You will be facing a lot of Tier 5s and Tier 6s that can one-hit kill you, even if you have more hit points than the other Tier 5 TDs. It's a fairly light tank. It's about 23 tons fully stocked for me. The SU-85 and the Wolverine are heavier, and it fits right in the middle. The S-35CA and the T-49 are a little bit lighter. I have rammed tanks to death in the SU-85i, but they are a lot lighter. They were a lot lighter than I was, and I've been rammed to death pretty easily by things like enemy comets. One of the big drawbacks to this tank is its engine. It only has 300 horsepower. And when you consider that it is not the lightest of the Tier 5 TDs I'm comparing it against, this engine power really hurts this tank a lot. It has significantly less power than its Russian cousin, the SU-85, and both the American Tier 5 TDs. Only the S-35CA has a weaker engine, but the S-35CA also weighs a little bit less. And when you look at this speed limit of 50 kilometers an hour and you think, wow, this thing is fast. This is going to be a very fast mobile tank destroyer. We have 48 degrees of traverse and 50 kilometers an hour speed. This thing is going to be fun. This is kind of like a Tier 5 equivalent of the E-25. I will be zooming around the place, taking shots, relocating, and just having fun in this tank. No, it's all lies. This engine power pushing this weight means the horsepower to weight limit is very poor. It takes forever to reach 50 kilometers, and in every single game I've played in this tank, I have only hit 50 kilometers for a split second once on flat ground. It is slow, it is sluggish, it takes forever to build up speed, and something you are not going to see in these stats, because it's one of those hidden stats, is that the ground resistance on this tank is absolutely horrible. On rough ground, you are going to be struggling to reach 20 kilometers an hour. Even on favorable ground, you will struggle to get up to 40 kilometers an hour, not even 50. And this is even before we get to talk about traversing hills. If this tank has to go up any slope whatsoever, it drops that speed so fast. This thing crawls up hills. It's almost like driving a tog sometimes. It is just a horrible experience. So this is my very first game in the SU-85i after purchasing it, and we are here on Live Oaks. It's a 46%er, and I'm looking forward to this tank. We've got 50 kilometers an hour top speed and an incredible 48 degrees of traverse. Here we go. So I'm going to fly down the 0 line, or at least so I think. So I've turned pretty quickly. And I'm looking at the speed creeping up and I'm thinking, okay, acceleration is not great. We hit a tree and we suddenly drop down to 25 kilometers. Okay, I'm up to 37, 36, 35, 34. So I'm losing a lot of speed on rises. Now I'm going to travel along the top of this railway track. And I can't get above 40 kilometers an hour. I'm on flat ground and I can't do above 40 kilometers an hour. What is going wrong? What's wrong with this tank? I've got 100% crew in here. I should be doing 50 kilometers. But I'm struggling to reach top speed, so I go down a slight rise. Okay, we're getting up to 50 kilometers now. And yes, there we go. We hit a tree and stopped dead. This is not a mistake. This tank will stop dead if it hits any sort of resistance, so I have gone from 48 kilometers an hour to 0 simply because I hit a tree. And I'm starting to think, what is going on here? I'm in a fast maneuverable TD and it's just not performing. So I set up in the usual TD spot and I'll speed it up. Okay. We've moved forward, my team are advancing, so I decide to advance. I get up 50 kilometers an hour going down that slope, but now I'm into rough ground and all of a sudden my speed is gone. I'm thinking I'm in a very fast maneuverable tank. I'm trying to play it like an E-25, but nope. Look at this, I'm doing 8-9 kilometers an hour up that slope. I switched to premium and missed that shot. No matter, don't know where it went. But AT2 is very well armored, so there we go. My first kill. And I switched back to normal ammo then. But look at the speed. I was expecting to fly around the map, and because I'm on rough terrain, I'm just not getting there. I'm doing 12 kilometers, 11 kilometers an hour on rough ground. And I don't want to hit any trees anymore because I don't want to stop dead. But there we go. Look at that. Speed drops off completely just from hitting a tree. So I'll speed up because basically we end up capping and game is over. So after playing a few more games and confirming that the acceleration and ground resistance on this tank are bloody awful, I finally ended up on Himmelsdorf, and here was a chance to finally test the engine. So it's a standard battle, and because I'm in a tank that can do 50 kilometers an hour, I'm going to head up the hill. Have to remember not to hit any trees, otherwise I'll lose all my speed. Avoiding all obstacles to try and get as much speed up as I can. And yep, we're accelerating. We've got up to 40 kilometers an hour. So there's no ground resistance here, but yet I'm struggling to reach top speed. The acceleration is just so slow. We get up to 46 kilometers an hour and then hit the slope, and yes, all my speed is gone. Yes, we're down to 10, 11 kilometers an hour traveling up the hill. This is it's just painful in a TD that should be so fast and so maneuverable. Just that lack of engine power kills it so much. And we're doing 16 kilometers an hour, trying to get up to the top of the hill, and look, there's a VK 3001P, and it is easily outpacing me. It is easily out-accelerating me up to the top of the hill. So not looking good for the tank so far. And while on paper it's fast with a pretty good traverse speed, it means nothing because the engine is crap. It takes forever to accelerate, it has horrible ground resistance, and it's just not fun to drive. On the armor side, things are looking up. We've got 60mm of frontal armor compared to all the other tier 5 TDs in my garage. And while it's more heavily armored, it means nothing. Because everything that shoots at you can and will pen you. HE messes this tank up. Anything firing HE at you will kill you. I have been one hit killed by Arty who have landed nowhere near me just through splash damage. This tank has no HE resistance whatsoever, and it gets worse when we look at the side armor. We've only got 30mm of side armor, and again, while we do compare favorably against some of the other tanks, the SU-85 on the Russian line has more, and our rear armor actually looks quite good. You've got to remember, this is a Panzer III hull. So on paper the armor is pretty good, but let's just get this clear. Let's just put it out here. The armor on this tank does not work. Everything that shoots at you will pen you. The only armor this tank has is its gun mantlet. That's it. Anything that hits you anywhere else on this tank will do damage. You do not bounce shots. First of all, you've got that very flat lower glacis because it's a PZ3. You've got a very flat strip towards the front of the fixed turret. And even though the upper turret is angled, it is still extremely flat, and enemy tanks have absolutely no problems penning you. The sides of the tank, again, are very flat. No problems for anyone penning you. Look at the amount of space people have to shoot at you through your tracks. You won't be absorbing very many shots with your tracks in this tank. They will go straight through and they will pen your hull. The back of the tank, again, is all flat. And once you take all of that into consideration, you've got this huge tumor on top of the tank. Yes, this is another problem with the tank. It has this huge big weak spot. And what this means is, and I haven't mentioned it before, this is a Russian TD. It's a Russian tank. You have very poor gun depression. In fact, you've only got 5 degrees of gun depression at the front of the tank. And that means that you cannot fight or use the terrain to your advantage. If you go hull down and still manage to get your gun on target, you are showing this huge big weak spot. So assuming they find it very difficult to hit your upper hull, and that's not difficult, believe me, they've got shots on this huge commander's cupola. Assuming that you're behind a rise in the ground and you want to get your gun on target, because of the really poor gun depression, that means you've got to advance and show most of your tank before you can actually get the gun on target. And not only does that expose your lower glacis, your upper hull, it'll also expose this huge weak spot long before you reach the top of the rise in order to pop over and get a shot. And the bad news doesn't stop there. Remember, it's a PZ3. You've got this lower glacis, and what that means is you also have frontal transmission, which means that shots that hit you in the lower glacis will set you on fire. This little sequence is going to show a lot of problems with this tank very quickly. It's a standard battle on Himmelsdorf. I've left spawn and I've been travelling up the hill. I've got friendly tanks who've reached the top of the hill before I have, and we're just going to go. Okay, so there's a T-49 who is already at the church. Gets to the top of the hill long before I do, even though I'm supposed to have 50 kilometers an hour. You can see I'm doing a whole 16 kilometers up this slope. But he's got the high ground, and I'm in a tank that has no gun depression, a very narrow gun arc, and quite a long aim time. So what's going to happen? I want to help this PZ3, and I check very quickly that I've got support coming up this hill with me. There's a UE-57 and a T-34, but I'm not going to get to the top of the hill. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay on the downslope because I've got poor gun depression. I need to expose so much of my tank to try and get up on the hill that I'm going to wait here for the T-49 and hope that the backup arrives, and I'm going to have supporting fire from behind from the UE and supporting fire from the side with the T-34. So I wait for the T-49 to advance, go through this long aiming time. Oh, he moved, got to readjust, and he's able to shoot down on me because he's got the gun depression. Now, because I'm moving, my aim reticule has suddenly gone to maximum again, and I'm trying to get my gun on target, and I've got to take a snapshot very quickly, and there you go. So, because I couldn't take snapshots due to the huge aim circle, and also because of the long aiming time, I've been missing. I couldn't hit him, he had the gun depression, he could hit me, and because I'm in a PZ3 with frontal transmission, a shot into my lower glacis will set me on fire. So it's not as if this tank didn't have enough problems without having to suffer from engine fires through lower glacis shots. The gun traverse actually looks pretty good at 44, which compares favourably to the stock SU-85 and is better than the other 3 tank destroyers. However, do not let this fool you. Yes, the gun traverse may look pretty good on paper, but what those stats don't show you is the gun arc, which is awful. The gun arc on this tank is incredibly bad. If the tank is facing you, let's just say we are tracking an enemy, the enemy is directly in front of me, and the enemy is going to be moving to my left, and I'm going to track him with my gun. There we go. That's about the maximum gun traverse. So yes, the 45 degrees will get me there very quickly, but then it locks. I've reached the end of my traverse arc, and now I've got to move the hull of my tank in order to continue following the tank, and that means I've got to go through the aim cycle again. Likewise to the other side, if the enemy tank is moving and he's directly in front of me, he's moving to my right, again we're just going to track him. There we go, I'm at the end of my arc, and now I've got to move the hull of my tank and go through the whole aim cycle again. So the gun traverse arc is only about that much, and it is awful, especially when we take a look at the gun. The gun isn't that bad on paper. In fact, everything about this tank isn't bad on paper, but it is terrible when you get it in-game. The rate of fire is not bad. It's not as good as the most of the tanks that I've been comparing it against. The Americans are obviously a lot faster, but it's not bad. The penetration at 119 is pretty poor, especially compared to the other Tier 5 TDs, and the alpha damage at 160 is okay. It is okay. I've actually been able to one-hit kill some tier 4s, but it doesn't happen very often. But the two biggest problems with this tank are its accuracy. The gun dispersion at 100 meters is 0.42, so the accuracy is pretty poor. And even more so than other Russian tanks I've played, this really feels bad. And that aiming time, again, is huge. 2.3 is not bad aiming time, but when you consider the fact that you're firing a fairly inaccurate gun with a tiny gun arc, you have to constantly go through that aiming time again and again and again in order to try and get a shot on the target, which means that more often than not, you are going to have to be firing this gun before being fully aimed if you're actually going to get a shot at the target, and the accuracy is just terrible. So let's see this gun in action. This is my first game on the new Malinovka map. I've gone down into the traditional TD spot in C5, and it's a 40%er. So I'm going to try and play this game like a traditional TD, and you're going to see some of the frustration that you have when you're driving an SU-85i. This is one of my earliest games, so happy with that shot. And I'm again don't know how the map is working, not sure where I'm going to get shots. So again, we'll speed it up till I have something to shoot at. Okay, here we go. Crusader in the open, moving across. Aim, 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 aim. Mistime that one. Okay, and now we're at the edge of the gun arc. Have to adjust, go through the aim time again. Just miss him. Okay, tracking him, tracking him, tracking him. And that shot goes low. Oh, and I'm at the end of my gun arc, so I've got to go through the reload again. And again, we've had to move again, readjust. And again, the shot just misses him. Absolutely no accuracy. And again, we've got to keep on moving our hull. Look at the size of our aiming circle. We have to keep on adjusting and going through that entire aim time. And again, the accuracy is just so bad. And I just give up. I just give up. I can't get this guy. I just cannot hit him. The narrow gun arc combined with the huge aim time really make this tank a challenge to play as a traditional TD. However, the penetration is not bad. So when you can finally get a target that's sitting still, and that gives you time to aim and shoot, you can pen, you can hurt them. So we've lost the north. That Crusader is still alive down there. No one can kill him. And I'm going to wait for these tanks to advance down. And again, I can't spot them because my view range is absolutely garbage. So I've got to advance as far as I can. Waiting for spots. We'll speed it up again. Oh, finally get some spots. And there's that accuracy. Can't hit the side of a barn door. Look. Perfect shot, fully aimed, shot goes low. But when it does hit a tank, you can do damage. The view range is awful. I cannot tell you how bad the view range is on this tank. The SU-85 has worse view range, but the other three TDs have it beaten by a long shot. The S-35CA has amazing view range at 400 meters. The Wolverine is very good at 370, and even the T-49, which is not renowned for its view range at 350, has this tank well beaten. The SU-85i is as blind as a bat. It does have good signal range compared to the other tanks. Not as good as the two Americans fully upgraded, but it is better than the S-35CA fully upgraded, and the SU-85 does get a better radio and can boost its signal range, but about the only positive here is that its view range is better than the Russian cousin, but it is still terrible. So here's a quick game on Westfield, and I'm just going to show you a couple of clips from this game that basically show the poor gun depression and also the really poor view range. Here we go. So I start out by heading up to the usual TD spot at A3. Now, this is one of the first games I've played. I think it's maybe the third or fourth game I've played in the tank. And I'm going to sit in this bush and shoot at tanks coming over the ridge. And then I suddenly realize I can't get my gun down. Can't get my gun down to shoot tanks on the ridge. So, okay, I'm going to have to move forward. And now I'm checking to see how much of my tank I'm exposing, and pretty much all of it. I'm not hidden behind the rise at all. So in order to get my gun down, I've got to expose my whole tank above this rise. So this is a little bit later in the game. We are doing quite well. We're winning 10-6, but a bunch of enemy tanks have broken through on the 0 line, and they're going to be heading down towards Cap. So I'm heading back to intercept them. So 38 kilometers, dropping off because there's a slight rise, and I'm getting slower and slower. Any rise in the ground at all, and the tank just loses all its speed. So I'm driving back. Enemy team aren't capping yet, so there's not that much pressure. There's a Covenanter. So I stop, got to go through this aim time, take a shot before being fully aimed, and thankfully it goes in. We are capping. And all 3 enemy tanks have now moved into our cap. For some reason our KV-1 decides to leave cap. But I've got to get back. There are 2 tanks in our cap. No time to stop. Let's shoot this guy on the move. Okay, 2 enemy tanks in cap. Now there are 3 enemy tanks in cap. I can't stop. Gotta get back. I've got my fingers crossed that I've got the view range, but nope, I forgot I'm in an SU-85i that has no view range. I'm going to crest this ridge. I stop, can't see a thing. So I fire blind just to try and stop the cap, and there we go. 3 enemy tanks return fire at me, but I couldn't see any of them. There's a lot of information about this tank on WhatWiki, but it's all wrong because the tank has never been available before. So this tank does get special matchmaking. You will only see tier 5s and 6s in this tank. You will not see tier 7s like the wiki says. Another thing that the Wikipedia gets wrong is the crew layout. The crew layout on wiki has 5 crew members. However, as you can see here, it only has 4. It is missing its radio operator. So let's talk about the crew. The crew layout is okay. It's a commander, a gunner, a driver, and a loader, which makes it very, very similar to the SU-122-44 at tier 7, which also has commander, gunner, driver, and loader. So it's the same crew layout. The SU-100Y actually has a better crew layout for training up crews. It has a commander, 2 gunners, a driver, and 2 loaders. So if you are planning to train up some spare Russian TD crews, it's possible that the SU-100Y is going to be a better option. So as far as crew training goes, the SU-85i is not bad, but it doesn't do anything that you can't do in the SU-122-44. Same crew layout. So I think you're getting the gist that I don't like the tank very much. In fact, I'm finding it very, very hard to find any redeeming features or a reason to buy this tank at all. And that is true even when it comes down to equipment. If you look at the equipment I have fixed, I've got vents, which again I put on every single tank. I've got the medium caliber gun rammer because it increases my DPM, and you need to put it on pretty much all your tanks because it's just good. You're doing 10% more damage per minute. And then because of the incredibly poor view range, I've gone for binocs. Now on paper, those would seem pretty solid choices to me. We'll take a look at the other equipment choices. Toolbox. Again, pretty useless. You don't have the hit points. So many tanks can one-hit kill you. It doesn't matter. Forget about the toolbox. The enhanced gun laying drive. Again, I would have always said that the view range and the DPM was more important, but for once, an enhanced gun laying drive would be a possible option for this tank, mainly because the aim time is so bad on this tank. 2.3 is not bad, but on this tank where you have to constantly go through that re-aiming cycle due to the fact you've got an incredibly narrow gun arc, it's a possibility, and I've played around with putting one on. The cyclone filter to increase your engine durability, waste of money because you just died too quickly in this tank to make use of it. Coated optics is another viable option on this tank, again because the view range is so bad. Anything that will boost that view range is good, but again, it's so bad to begin with. I really can't see the benefit of coated optics over binocs. We come down to additional grousers, so it gives 10% to performance on soft ground and plus 5% to performance on moderately soft ground. Again, I would normally never ever recommend these on any tank, but this thing's ground resistance is so bloody awful. This is a possible choice. I mean, I would consider taking out something like vents or even the gun rammer in order to put these on, simply to give this tank a little bit more maneuverability. But it is completely up to you. All of this, most of this equipment is viable. The gun rammer is on the tank already. We come down to the medium spall liner, and again, I would never normally say put a spall liner on your tanks, not unless you've got something that is big, heavy, and everything on the battlefield is going to want to shoot you. But I am taking so much HE damage in this tank, it's a viable option. I have been one hit killed by arty that has missed me and has still done 380 damage with splash. I have been one hit killed by tanks one tier below me firing derp guns. So the medium spall liner is another viable option, even though you've got next to no hit points to begin with anyway. The enhanced torsion bars, probably one of the few pieces of equipment I'd say ignore. You really need other equipment far more than you need to increase the durability of your tracks. A wet ammo rack, again, complete waste of time on this tank, mainly because when this tank gets spotted, it dies. Full stop. You are not going to bounce any shots. Enemy tanks go through you, it doesn't matter what tier they are, and even if they do ammo rack you, you're going to be dying just 1 or 2 seconds later, so really don't see a point in having the wet ammo rack. Improved vents, as I say, should go on every single tank, but there are only so many equipment slots, and this tank is so bad in so many aspects, it needs every piece of equipment. If I could fit every single piece of equipment on this tank, I would, because this tank needs all the help it could get. Even the camo net, again, this thing gets spotted, it dies. Camo net is definitely a possible equipment choice. And I have been tempted to go for the vents plus camo net and binocs, but this thing can't snipe. The accuracy of the gun is just not good enough to make this a sniper. So we're coming to the end of the review, and it's time for the overview game, and as much as I dislike this tank, it is possible to have good games in it, but it's bloody hard work. Here we go. We are here on Ruinberg. It's an all tier 5 game, thankfully. And I decide that I'm going to travel down the 0 lines. And again, I'm struggling to reach my top speed. Going up this slight rise, and I'm actually slowing down. Now this is a 100% crew. I don't want to think what a turd this tank would be with a 75% crew. I could not even imagine playing this tank with a 75% crew, or even a 50% crew. It is difficult enough to play with a fully trained crew. Little bit of lag, as I say, 9.0 problems. I'm suffering some lag. Hitting trees, slowing right down, doing 20 kilometers an hour because I hit that tree. This is a tank that's supposed to do 50 kilometers an hour. So again, T49, go through that long aim time, and then have to reach the end of my gun arc. So he's sitting still. Get one shot into him. The alpha damage is okay. Get a second shot into him. I don't have Sixth Sense. I do in later games on this tank, but I don't have Sixth Sense, so I'm not sure if I've been spotted. And there we go. There's French arty that has absolutely no splash damage, doesn't hit me, and still manages to do 126 damage. This tank gets absolutely destroyed by HE. And something I haven't mentioned in the review so far is the crew members die so quickly in this tank. I'm actually surprised I got away with no crew members dying through that splash damage. But I've been spotted, and I'm the only tank on the 0 line, so I've got to relocate. I'm not going to hold the 0 line alone, just in case they've got enemy, or just in case enemy tanks are advancing down the 0 line. Artie knows where I am now, so they're probably still pre-aiming there, waiting for me to pop up on radar again. So I've relocated, trying to get shots on tanks in the middle. And again, it's just 14, 15 kilometers an hour. It's just such a pain. On paper, this tank looks so maneuverable, but it's not. Okay, there was a hint of a Hetzer there. KV-1 advancing. And we get a good shot into the side of the KV-1. Hetzer. And old man reaction shot. Hetzer dies before I put a shot in. So again, I've got to relocate, just in case I was spotted. So it doesn't look as if anything's coming down the 0 line. The enemy team of 3 RT. Just got a hint of a shot in a PZ-2G. And again, that inaccuracy. And he dies before I can kill him. So enemy team are collapsing. And I'm going to try and use my speed and my maneuverability, what little there is, to do some flanking, because it really doesn't look as if any enemy tanks have come down the 0 line. The only tank that hasn't been spotted on the enemy team is the Churchill, and I'm a little bit apprehensive about running into him, because he will tear me apart. But look at this speed. I'm doing 30 kilometers an hour just because there's a slight rise. SU-85i with his back to me. And again, I take a shot before being fully aimed because the aim time is just so long and I do not want to get hit by Artie. Didn't want to sit there for the full aim time. Luckily enough, the shot went in and we ammo racked him. But again, I'm relocating and I'm doing a slight speed increase, or I'm getting a slight increase by heading downhill. And we just touched 50 kilometers an hour. We actually did touch 50 kilometers an hour, but because there's rough ground, we dropped back down to 30, and now we're back up to 40. Traveling up a slight rise, and again my speed slows down to 35. There are heavy tanks that do this speed easily. So I'm going Artie hunting, just 3 Artie and the Churchill left. Want to get some revenge on the LEFH 18B2. And he's in the open, but again, my view range, I can't see him. This guy's sitting in the open and I can't see him. I have to rely on friendly tanks to spot him. So we get 1 shot in, get another shot in. But the view range is just so bad. The aim time is so bad. The speed, the maneuver. There is nothing positive I can say about this tank. So again, we advance, but I don't spot him. Have to rely on teammates to spot him. So we aim. And we get a kill. So we're up to 4 kills in this game. Just 1 enemy tank left, the Churchill 1. I'm wondering if he's down in the corner, but it doesn't look it. So, the enemy team tell us he's in A0, so I decide to relocate again, and I'm on roads. I'm on solid ground with very little resistance here, and again I'm struggling to get to 50 kilometers an hour. I'm doing 44. As soon as I start traversing, I end up losing speed, and I'm struggling to hit anything above 40. So slowly accelerating, but as soon as I turn or hit any rough ground, the speed just drops off. So we hit a tree, and again we lose a whole 4 kilometers an hour just from hitting that tree. Churchill's been spotted. We're going slightly downhill on easy ground, and we just touched 50 kilometers an hour. But as soon as we start hitting debris, as soon as we start turning and maneuvering our tank, that speed just bleeds off. So again, I take a blind shot without being fully aimed because Churchill was moving into cover, and the shot goes absolutely nowhere near where I aimed it. So, waiting for the Churchill to appear, realize he's in a dip, not going to get shots, and again you see me adjusting my gun arc just in case the Churchill advances and I need to take a shot. You have to constantly do this in this tank. It's just such hard work. Churchill does take out our PZSFL-4C, but he still advances. So I'm just going to move up and try and get him as he comes around the rise. But I don't trust my view range. I've got to literally close the distance because I don't trust my view range. Again, he reached the end of my gun arc. I had to reduce or adjust. And there we go. In order to get the kill, I had to risk 2 shots at close range without being fully aimed. I just did not have time to aim. So we've come to the end of the review, and I'm struggling to find anything positive to report on this tank at all. It has special matchmaking, I suppose, but it doesn't matter because every tank that shoots at you, even if they're 2 tiers below you, are going to pen you. It has more hit points than most other tier 5 TDs, but it still doesn't matter because everything that shoots at you is going to pen you, and 380 hit points means you can still be one-shot killed by anything with a 122 or anything firing a derp gun. On paper, it looks fast. It's got a 50 kilometers an hour speed limit, but you will never ever reach that speed unless you are going downhill. Again, on paper, the traverse speed looks pretty good, but that's only assuming you are on solid ground, because the ground resistance on this tank is absolutely horrible, and you will struggle to get any speed in this tank whatsoever. The acceleration, due to the poor engine power to weight ratio, means that it's slow to accelerate, and you can't speed around and relocate very, very easily. Even though technically it's got more frontal armor than most other TDs at the same tier, nothing will bounce, and the gun mantlet is about the only armor you can count on this tank. It is covered in weak spots. You can be set on fire through the lower glacis, and you've got this terrible tumor on top of your tank. That means you can't use terrain features to hide most of your tank. The gun is a huge letdown as well. The average penetration combined with the poor accuracy mean that you will struggle to hit weak spots at long distance, and you will be shooting this gun at long distance because you don't have the view range or you don't have the armor for close range engagements. On top of that, while on paper the aim time of 2.3 is not bad, because of the incredible narrow gun arc, you are going to be going through that aim time again and again and again. It is just a horrible experience. The view range is terrible. This thing is as blind as a bat. You really need to rely on your teammates to spot enemy tanks for you, because you don't have the hit points, you don't have the armor, and if you're spotting your own tanks, then it means that they can spot you, and the moment you're spotted in this tank, you will die. But on the bright side, the signal range isn't bad. Another bright side is the crew layout isn't bad. It's a pretty good crew trainer. However, the question I need to ask is, if you do want a Russian premium TD to train up crews, why not get the SU-122-44? It is a far better tank. Even though it's higher tier, it could compete at those tiers competitively, whereas the SU-85i is just a struggle. In addition to the SU-122-44, which I think is a much better premium TD for the Russian lines, you've got the SU-100y. Now this is a kind of a fun tank. You will either do really well or really badly in this tank, but it is rather amusing to play because of this awesome gun. It doesn't have any armor. When it gets spotted it dies, so it has the same issue as the SU-85i, but the difference is it's got a really good gun, whereas the SU-85 doesn't. I really struggle to think of anything good to say about this tank. There are only 2 reasons I can think of why someone would want to buy this tank. One is if they are a collector and they want to have this relatively rare tank in their garage. And the second reason is they can't afford to get an SU-122-44 or an SU-100Y, and they want a Russian premium TD to train up a crew with. But even so, I just can't recommend this tank. It's not fun to play. It is frustrating, and I have next to nothing positive to say about this. Is it worth it? No. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.